it all leads here to the cross. It all leads here. As Christians, we say it doesn't end here, but we have to say it all leads here. Jesus was not the first faithful Jew to be crucified. In the year 4, Varus crucified 2,000 Jews. In the year 70, Titus was said to have crucified 500 a day. We don't know for how many days. He was not the first and he would not be the last to be crucified, but we say there is something different about that, because for us it actually leads all of us to the cross. There is something about following Jesus that is dangerous. I thought about this a little bit driving back and forth. Have you ever noticed when a policeman stops a car, your first thought is, whew, it's not me. And your second thought might be, as it is mine, how they pull off to the side of the road. Have you ever noticed how they do that? For those of you who are picture straighteners, it will upset you, because they don't pull in directly behind the other car. They leave the rear end of their car sticking out into the lane a little bit, and as you try to not, race by too much, you have to swerve a little bit. And they all do it so you know it's on purpose. They pull out a little bit so that if you hit a car, it won't be the one that they stopped, it'll be their car. It'll be so that you notice it and you won't run into anyone. This wonderful turnabout that the person they are stopping, who has certainly done something to warrant them stopping, hopefully just speeding or going through a little bit of a light, nothing crazy or life-threatening, but they don't know that, of course. Whatever they're stopping that person for, they have to, they're bringing that person to some form of justice, but at the same time, they're protecting that person. And they stick out a little bit so that they put themselves in danger to help save the other person. When we follow Christ, we may end up in a lot of trouble. It all leads to the cross. Martin Luther King Jr. sort of channeled, if you will, some of the words of Moses when he talked about getting to the promised land. He said, I might not get there with you, because we know that Moses did not actually get there, but I know you're going to get there. And he said this only a short time before his own death. Following in the footsteps of Jesus, being a prophetic voice in the world, can lead you into trouble. And that day is coming. That's why I read that little bit there from Hebrews. Let us consider how to provoke one another. I love that. Provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. The one thing that we can prove about Jesus, and most of it we can't prove outside of the Bible itself, the one thing that we can prove historically about Jesus is that he was crucified. The Jewish historian Josephus, we talk about him a lot because he wrote a lot around the time of Jesus, and he was allowed to go around with some of the Roman troops, and he would write down things that would happen. Josephus wrote, as did the Roman historian Tacitus, they wrote that Jesus had undergone the death penalty in the reign of Tiberius by sentence of the procurator Pontius Pilate. That Pilate, upon hearing him accused by men of the highest standing amongst us, and condemned him to be crucified. From our creeds we hear Jesus suffered under Pontius Pilate and was crucified. They agree in that. So Jesus was crucified. What we can't prove from historians is his resurrection. But we can prove that he existed and that he was crucified. It leads to the cross. An atheist friend of mine used to joke around and say, you're kind of lucky that Jesus died when he did. Because if he died later on, instead of wearing crosses around your necks and other places, you might have little hangman's nooses or little electric chairs. It would be quite the fashion statement to wear electric chairs around our necks. And I would usually say, no, actually what we'll do is we'll have a little lightning bolt. Play along a little bit. That was before Harry Potter. It would have a whole different thing to wear a lightning bolt around you now. But thinking back on it, yes, I would go for the electric chair over the lightning bolt. We own this symbol of death and failure, this symbol of criminals executed. We're sort of removed from it as that symbol now. We don't see people crucified nowadays. Maybe we miss something about the human death of Jesus when we just see crosses and we're used to them just meaning church. We remove some of that humanness of Jesus even when we have a crucifix, when we have the body of Jesus on the cross. Because if you ever looked at the art from Middle Ages on, he doesn't seem completely human. In that, if you go up to that body, and many art historians have made this point, why is Jesus always hairless? He is a flesh and blood human being, and yet we sort of do an airbrush version, even when there is blood and gore. We would claim that, yes, this horrible way to die, this death that is inevitable for following the will of God, is the way to us, for us, to salvation. It all leads here. And what happens when Jesus is on the cross? Here in the Gospel of John, we have the story of the beloved disciple. Now, as church historians, we've always argued over who is this beloved disciple. Some will say that it is John, but I would say, personally, I'm of the belief that we're not supposed to know who it is. If it was John, the Gospel of John would have said, John. Why go about all the trouble to have this long-winded, the beloved disciple? We have an understanding that perhaps the people who brought us the Gospel of John and wrote it down after time, perhaps that's one way that they talked about each other as beloved disciples. And perhaps it's out of that tradition of Jesus saying the beloved disciple, the people talking about the beloved disciple, then them talking to each other as if they were the beloved of God. This mysterious thing of the beloved disciple. Perhaps one of the reasons it's not mentioned is because we're supposed to see ourselves in that place. And Jesus looks down and sees the disciple whom he loved, as it says in the Gospel, and his mother, and he says, in some of his dying breath, "Woman, behold your son, son, behold your mother." As Jesus dies on the cross for all of us, he says, you are now the family. You are now here for one another. Whether or not you were with me all the while, you are beloved, and this is your mother. And she needs to know that you are the son, the daughter, the beloved ones. And as we go into our times of trouble, knowing we are that family for each other and part of God's family, what are we to do with that? How are we supposed to go to know what to do? Let us consider from this time forth that we are the beloved disciples. Let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching.